Welcome,
Yeah,
everybody. We are live again with Mosaic Live, Sundays at 5.
it's Sunday afternoon, and you know what that means. This is just a soft spot in our schedule. Boy, I think for me, especially, hopefully for you, it's a week filled with activity, and it's sometimes just hard to find a soft spot in your schedule to recover, recoup, set an agenda for the week to come,
Yep.
to look back at the week to pass. And if you think about all of that, this becomes just the right place and time to have that kind of discussion, because hopefully we'll give you just a good energy to end your weekend and good things to keep on your mind as you go into the week to come.
This is the time for sure. It is Sunday. It is 5
Yeah.
p.m., which means, as usual, we are fired up. We are talking about revolution. And we're extra fired up today, obviously, because of everything that's happened recently. Today we're going to talk about uh, the crisis
Yeah, yeah,
that is
yeah.
going on. And yeah, maybe that word's a little bit. We're kind of always in a rolling poly crisis now, right? Which just gets deeper and deeper. But
This is
there's
a
no
rolling
world.
crisis, not just now. I mean, literally four years ago, you can go back to me doing podcasts and stuff, and talking about uh, rehabilitation, who needs to be rehabilitated, how, and who shouldn't, who can't be rehabilitated, what are the limits of rehabilitation. And I don't know if we came to conclusions, if I came to conclusions 4 years ago, and I don't know if we're going to have hard conclusions now. I'm not in a rehabilitatory mood. I'll tell you that the general public is in a less rehabilitatory mood than they've ever been.
Hmm.
I honestly think, and we've seen so much. I mean,
Well, that
man,
would
if
be
you're
an
black, you've
interesting.
seen the history of police violence. You don't need someone to tell you something new. It feels like, however, the degree and the cavalierness and the mask off attitude that we've seen over the last few months, that even in the mainstream and people who don't think about politics that much, more and more people are saying, man, I don't have a choice but to think about this.
Right. I mean, I think the hard abolitionist issues of like justice is a super deep and interesting topic that we should totally have a whole episode on. Um, and right now, of course, we're talking about specifically this situation with ICE, where rehabilitation isn't really as much a part of what we're talking about, because we're not really talking about criminal justice, right? We're talking about immigration, and they're enforcing immigration laws that are related to the border, not really related to hurting anybody.
We're in a criminal justice issue right here, I would say.
I mean, yeah, definitely. And I think that.
I mean, if you saw what you saw on the street right now, you'd say, even if you were well, even if you were an abolition minded person, you would watch this footage and you would say that deserved some reprisal right there.
I think an unprecedented amount of people are saying abolish ICE without even getting into the conversation of abolishing the police or not. So many people are ready to abolish ICE at this point, and even commentators who have been ones typically to kind of uh, walk the fence and not really take positions on social justice, even they are speaking up about stuff like this because it's just gotten that bad. I mean, as much as you can say, oh, we were already in a constitutional crisis with everything else, well, there's still no world or no timeline where this crackdown by the federal ICE authorities is totally an unprecedented level of constitutional civil rights crisis.
Yeah, I know, for us, I mean, we had a 3 or 4 minute period, and we said, "Boy, do we even feel like going on the air today?"
Yeah.
How much needs to be said that isn't? I mean, on some in some way, in a negative way of, I'd love to process this in private and come back in a week and have a little bit of distance. But I'll tell you, there's almost nothing that can be said about this situation that you're not going to hear in just mainstream media, because it's the same reaction that any person off the street would just have if you showed it to them.
Well, hopefully, let's hope that we can provide something that's a little more uh, radical and deeper than you would hear, because that's the content we want to try to make, right?
Boy,
But yeah,
we
you know, those people in Minnesota don't want to be coming out today in the cold, right? Um, yeah, I was tempted to say, man,
I don't know those.
I was like, hey,
Yeah,
I'd love to have another week to do more and more research and make it just perfect by the time we're ready to do it. But you know what? People are disappearing. Someone was shot yesterday. An American citizen was shot yesterday morning by ICE. So we really don't have time to ICE is rushing out there into the field unprepared. That's not to say that we shouldn't prepare.
It's kind of funny. Yeah. I would definitely tell you, the stage of history. We've got to think about what will the books write about what people did in this moment.
Right.
And I don't want the history books to say, especially because you can go anywhere where there's, and you'll hear who's doing something about all of this. And of course, if you live here, 40% of the country lives from paycheck to paycheck and literally does not have the free hands to think about or do anything besides just keep their electricity on and keep the roof over their head, especially if you've got kids.
Yeah.
Family, to channel your anger, rage, feeling, compassion, whatever it is, whatever emotion you have, has got to be channeled into you clicking on a keyboard or moving bricks from one pile to another. But even with that being said, even if you've got an extra breath or an extra blink of your eye or an extra moment to sigh or an extra rock to throw, none of us should let the history books say, oh, the people here didn't really care about freedom.
Right. I mean,
because, well, first of all, it's not true. And second of all, we shouldn't, first of all, it's not true. And second of all, we shouldn't make it or let it be true.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I want to read, actually, since you mentioned that, a passage from a Crime Think article that was posted about the response in Minneapolis to ICE, and how many ICE officers were chased out and, their vehicles smashed up. It says, quote, "Tonight, January 14th, so that's a little over a week ago, it finally assumed corporeal form again," referring to the George Floyd uprising. And it says, "People will remember tonight as the opening salvo of a people's counterattack against a fascist invasion." Now that I've read that, and I'll post the article for everyone, let's kind of justify
I thought that was going to be a much larger excerpt. Yeah, go for it.
I mean, let's take a minute to explain, just in case people aren't aware, what are the elements of the abuses and the crisis that's happening. Like, what are people concerned about? What is ICE doing? So, as we mentioned, they've been killing people extrajudicially. Just recently, Renee Good, and then Alex Pretty, I believe was the name. And that was just yesterday. So there's no signs of stopping. They've been mocking people.
We wouldn't
about it,
and we don't, and also we don't have to end there. Illegal detentions, illegal interference.
right?
It's not even just the murders that should outrage people. They shouldn't even be there in the state at all.
Yeah, there's so many levels to it where there's taking people who they had no right to take. There's detaining them for longer than they had any right to detain them, not giving them some of their rights while they're in detention, like a phone call, like water, basic human rights. And then there's, once they get out of detention, there's, people being mistreated, people being tortured and beaten up in detention. And then there's people who, when they're released, like, say they realized, oh, there's no legal reason for us to keep this person. There's people who they're just leaving in the most crazy situations where it's like, we took you and drove you 6 hours down to Texas, and now we're just going to kick you out and you have to figure it out, right? Or, similarly, you've got situations where they take the parents out of a car and leave a toddler alone in the car on the side of the road being like, what the hell do I do? This is inhumane. These are human rights abuses that are very serious. And that's not even getting to the level of, that we're going to go to in terms of how it goes even deeper. People are disappearing from the system, and there's really a racist Nazi agenda behind this whole thing.
A racist agenda, and also a partisan political agenda. Right. You've gone from what was, haggling over bills to occupying states to get access to the voter rolls of the states in order to harass people between now and the election based on what state did these people vote for,
Yes.
It's just on a level that is that's an even dumber and lower level than human rights violation.
A Nazi agenda. I think people are used to hearing that from people like me, but I want to explain how this truly is the work of Nazis. Like, they want to create a system in which this ICE apparatus is not only about immigration enforcement, but it's enforcing opinions. It's enforcing political positions against opposition, to where, if you disagree with the party, the Republicans, the party is the nation for them, and you're a traitor if you disagree. And you may lose your citizenship. You may lose your constitutional rights. This is Nazi stuff. This is not to be taken lightly as, well, they just call everyone Nazis. Stephen Miller truly, has a desire to ethnically cleanse America. But I do think that is really just cover for, a political cleansing, a purge,
Yeah.
We've seen how new rules have come into play where it's your position on Israel actually makes a difference on your odds of getting a visa. People,
social media background checks that are larger than what you get for a job.
Right. Right. Yeah, this should be concerning to everyone. And
An already invasive level of background checking, by the way, and a discussion for another time.
yeah, it's worth mentioning here that, we're in Atlanta, which is a heavily surveilled city. It's also a city that is ruled by Democrats. And these Democrats would like to portray, I think it's less so here, but in a place like Minneapolis, certainly, the Democrats in charge want to portray some opposition to ICE where, like, they're the local ones. They're the good cops who are pushing back against this federal overreach. But when you actually look at what's happening, every time the local cops are doing a lot more to collaborate with ICE and help them than they are doing anything to help the resistance. So here in Atlanta, that includes using this surveillance camera apparatus to surveil everyone.
I wish I had the website that talks about that in more depth, but I know what you're talking about.
If you can find it, we'll go ahead and put it in the comments or something. We're going to be leaving a lot of links for people because there's a lot of resources out there. But
we might end up doing it after the show.
Sure.
So, by the time that you see this, if you're not one of our live viewers and you're watching this in the week to come, you'll find some things for further reading, of course.
The connection I want to point out here with that is flock safety. Okay, on one end, I'm saying, yes, the local PDs collaborate
with ICE. That is what
ICE.
the website is. It's Deflock Atlanta. I'm glad you used the right word, Deflock Atlanta.
Thank you. Yes, Flock Safety is a company that I think is based in Atlanta, but they're heavily involved in police mass surveillance and also, like, the same in Israel. Like, they are part of the surveillance apparatus of the Israeli state oppressing Palestinians. So they have an interest in crossing those streams, right? Like saying, if you're an opponent of Israel, you're likely to get on the cops' radar as well. And they're working with both, basically. The main thing I'm saying is, even when the local Democrat politicians are saying, we want ICE out, we want our own police to deal with this, their own police are helping ICE by turning over this surveillance data and helping them find immigrants. I mean,
these are the cops that couldn't even get hired as cops. Right. We talk about how cops and correctional officers especially have just insane rates of turnover because, and this applies double/triple, that there's so much turnover because these are jobs that just no one in society really wants. You might go in there and think that you're going to make a few bucks, and then you get into it and you're like, oh wait, this is just completely against the human instinct. Yeah. And they drop out. And of course, in Georgia, we could make a whole separate episode about it, but just as a whole, corrections officers in the United States have insane turnover. The usual time for a person to be a corrections officer is 3 months. And after that, they're like, there's nothing in the world for that for a job.
I know someone who used to do
these guys are even less qualified than that.
Yeah, I know somebody who was one once, and they said they'd never do it again. They said it was the worst job they've had. I think, it's worth pointing out there was recently a report where an investigative journalist applied to join ICE, and even though she was kind of marked by far-right groups as like an Antifa person, they hired her. They pretty much didn't really ask her for anything. They were like, all right, you can do this, but
it was, yeah, they hired her. Doesn't even fully get into, like, they sent her an acceptance message and told her to go to a portal to fill out more information, and
yeah.
she didn't even fill it out. And they sent her a few days later, "You've been accepted. Just show up." Mind blowing.
The deeper you go, the more you realize this is an extremely unprofessional force that is literally just taking anyone. And it's almost like this
Recruiting at like at sub UFC minor league mixed martial arts.
Yeah.
Just at gyms, at gun shows, just places where they think that. And no offense to you if you like sub UFC martial arts or the gym or the gun show, but just where they think that just the most unmotivated people in society are hanging out, and they're having problems even there.
Yeah, or the guys that kind of fit their archetype of, you know, the tough,
Right.
strong man that they want. Like,
and of course what's coming down from the top is like weird manifest destiny, protect your culture, white nationalist dog whistles that are so deep in the white nationalist bubble that even the people who they're trying to recruit just find it weird and off-putting.
that's an important thing to point out too. The Department of Homeland Security is using messaging on the internet that is basically identical to Nazi messaging from like 5 years ago. And you know, combine all of this
Or
with
if you're younger, poll. If you're a 4chan, maybe this is older and not younger.
Yeah.
If you're a remember 4chan, this is like stuff that would have been posted on poll
yeah.
back in the day. It just the dregs of society.
I mean, this is the latest, the cutting edge of Nazis. This is not old school Nazis, you know, people who are not hip with the internet stuff might miss these dog whistles, these references, but people who are my age who can see what the government is posting on the internet are like, holy crap, the government has gone full Nazi. Yeah, and you know, combine all of that with the historical context, right? Like, you gotta have a little bit of context of like how Nazis are messaging, and why, you know, knowing these like dog whistles, these inside jokes, I guess, that they have. But then there's like, you know, also knowing the context that ever since the 80s, ever since the late 70s, far right elements have been trying as hard as they can to weasel their way into military, into police, you know. Not that they weren't always all up in the police, but like the extreme far right to enter these spaces and try to basically abuse them for their political agenda, which I'm trying to tell people that is what's happening on the highest level.
Yeah.
So it becomes, what do we do? Oh, wait. Let me just back that up a little bit more. Here's an example. In recent, like, ICE operations in Minneapolis.
You're not sharing a conspiracy theory, by the way, because
no,
the FBI published that as an the FBI published that as an internal report just a couple of years ago.
Oh, sure, yeah, in terms of their overall analysis of the situation, but on a more granular level,
there's been, yeah.
Like a very clear example from a recent story is that recently when ICE came through and abducted some people in Minneapolis, they left behind some very distinctive calling cards they left behind printed cards of the Ace of Spades, which, you know, said also ice, said it was distinctly from ice. And what's interesting about that is that the Ace of Spades has historically been used by, like, the Klan and, you know, by white supremacists as like a very low-key threat. They would leave it on a place to basically say, you know, you are marked by the Klan. So the way they're choosing to present themselves to the public is just insane, and it seems geared towards both recruiting more Nazis, more people who are ideologically committed to Nazism, and trying to provoke people. Now, we don't want to fall into this whole thing of like, oh, they just want to provoke you into stuff. No, go do stuff, right? But like, there is an element where they're intentionally being provocative. They want to start the fights that they think that they can win, and avoid the fights that they know that they can't. But thankfully, they cannot win this fight. If you look at what's happening on the ground, autonomous, decentralized, rapid response networks have been doing a crazy job of resisting ICE and also resisting a recent fascist rally up there, where we got some very good video of the fascist guy just crying and being all alone and being surrounded by people who were pelting him with water balloons and stuff.
Yeah. That was also in Minneapolis just a few days ago.
Yeah. So, this is happening. It does feel like a very different vibe here in Atlanta right now, but I have no doubt that the unrest will continue to spread. The outrage, you know, will continue to galvanize more resistance.
What else we got?
Well, I mean, when it comes to resistance, you know, I'll try and look up some more good examples, you know, where we can kind of see like something and be like, that's a win. But it might be a good time to go ahead and shout out some resources that are available to people if you want to help resist. There are...
Well, you know, in Minnesota, I mean, I'm sure you're going to have resources to share, but just sharing news, there's been a statewide general strike in the state. Schools have closed. Businesses have shut down. Over 700 businesses in Minnesota closed this week. And this was before the shooting.
We got to talk about that.
Just shoppers have refused to buy. You've heard that, you've seen that, and you've also seen members of the clergy. 100 clergy members arrested 2 days ago in relation to the general strike that's been going on there.
Right.
And yeah, as you said, there's also been neighborhood response networks. People are setting up car alarms and using their key fobs. There's been a lot of stuff going on like that. And of course, Target has been is headquartered there. Lots of actions that have targeted Target specifically, sit-ins, buy and return line. I mean, just
and Home
hundreds
Depot
of solidarity actions have also been happening across the U.S. Home Depot's here.
Yeah, Target and Home Depot are both, you know, sponsors of ICE, and they also sponsored Cop City. So resistance to those corporations, you know, has already been building here in Atlanta, and with Home Depot, there was there was a series of actions where people came into Home Depots in mass, right? Bought like a $1 ice scraper and then returned it. So they were able to bog down the checkout line for a good while, because the time it takes to return an entire crowd's worth of $1 ice scrapers was just a huge waste of time for the company. I think stuff like that is great. We should already be trying to boycott any of these companies that are actively investing against our interests.
Yeah. I offhandedly mentioned buy and return lines, and yeah, that's what that is. Yep.
Well, just to go down the list, like some of the private sector corporations that support ICE are Amazon and Whole Foods, Target, like you mentioned, Palantir, which is Peter Thiel's military AI thing. It just says every hotel chain. That's not very helpful. Home Depot, Lowe's, AT&T, Aramark, Eastern Airlines, Global X, Omni Air, Flock Systems, which we mentioned already as a major adversary, Dell, UPS, FedEx, Motorola, LexisNexis, and Thomson Reuters. So if you want to find out even more about who's profiting from ICE, we will have a link in the description for an interactive map where you can see all over the country a bunch of places that have either, there's a bunch of different fields here. Some of them have donated to the Prison PAC, which is a lobbying group that supports ICE. It also shows the detention facilities on here and other things. Well, so that's one of the resources we have for people. Get creative. There is, any way that you can.
If you've heard of it, stop buying it.
Yeah. I mean, if we can impact any of these companies' bottom line at all, we know that that's the number one thing they care about. I will say there needs to be some communication where it has to be clear that that's a gesture of you're doing this because you oppose their support of ICE. So, if you just kind of do some, somehow impact their profits, like that's cool and all, but it would be great if they know that that's happening because of their support for ICE. Some other resources you can use, like we mentioned, we got the interactive map. There is watchice.org, which is another interactive map. Instead of showing supporters of ICE, it shows where people are being detained by ICE and how many. So if you want to help show solidarity with the migrants and citizens and whoever else who are currently being detained by ICE, that's a great way to find them. You've also got icelist.is, which is, I think, a website based in Iceland or something. That is a journalistic project to document the agents of ICE, the operations of ICE. It's basically a Wikipedia of ICE where you can find out all about ICE agents, ICE operations. So we'll make sure to share those. And there's a bunch of Georgia-specific resources as well. legal support. We'll share those in the description as well. There are hotlines you can call if you need legal support. When, you know,
Mm-hmm.
when I was watching the Tim Waltz's response to all of the incidents, all of the events of yesterday, you know, he was posturing like, oh, we don't want these feds. We can handle this with our city cops. But he had to admit, you know, it was sort of let out in the telling of the whole story. He had to admit the federal forces eventually were pushed out by the protesters in Minneapolis, and the local cops were not able to come in, meaning an autonomous zone was formed where people were able to physically remove the presence of the feds and the cops. I think that's pretty amazing. You know, some people who've never seen it happen might doubt that
Mm-hmm.
that can happen, but we just saw it yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Um. So yeah, when I say, you know, they're kind of trying to provoke, I don't mean that to say that, you know, like some of the liberal pacifists right now who are saying, oh, don't let them provoke you into resisting. Like, that's the normal response. That's what we should be doing when faced with this kind of tyranny, right? But this anxious,
Yeah.
aggressive
Uh-huh.
posturing, like, my point is that
Yeah.
posturing comes from a place of insecurity where the ruling class feels so weak compared to their, you know, relative, like, recent position, that they're like, they want to test the defenses. They want to make sure that the state can absolutely crack down any opposition. And they're using immigrants as a way to separate the people from that opposition so that they can bear down on it and form the apparatus that will crush any opposition to the corporate
Right.
oligarchy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of what I have to say. I just hope people are hearing this message and are ready to take
Yeah.
it very seriously, as we need to be on some serious time
I
here.
feel I really do feel like there's not a lack of seriousness in the public. Lack of, I mean, what's great is you think everybody in Minnesota was like was doing poly ed before they got out there. No offense to people that are doing reading. You don't have to read a book to know what to do in these situations. If
Yeah.
you're there, someone will tell you. And in terms of the vital knowledge that was needed for just physical resistance, you saw here in what you're going to see in Minnesota is more of it, because it doesn't look like they're leaving anytime soon. But you could look in Hong Kong, you could look in other places. People are just naturally inclined to defend themselves with the tools that they have available to them.
Well, you're definitely right that, like, this is the human response to this kind of situation, you know?
Yeah.
Although
Yeah.
I do think that, you know,
This isn't a thing that no one needs to.
I mean, when you go to those situations,
I wouldn't
though,
say no one needs to. I wouldn't say no one needs to shake a book at you it helps. I'm sure they know how to read up there.
Yeah, I was gonna say probably whoever is the one telling people, do this, and forming a strategy probably has been reading some books, and that's why the strategy is more effective than it has been in the past.
But 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 it's important to remember that it's also just shaped by what happens,
Mm-hmm.
and what makes it harder for the government to counter is that what they're doing is unique to their place, situation, time, resources, etc.
Right. And a conceptual understanding does not equal an experiential understanding. I think people are,
Yeah,
although as I mentioned in that quote, the George Floyd uprising was very strong in Minneapolis, so that was part of the building blocks of this experience that's being utilized right now.
yeah.
But yeah, there's aspects of this that are like habit forming that only come from doing and feeling what it's like.
And we should not take any of that for granted. You can just look at the news. We spent an hour talking about the situation in Minneapolis. I would be hard pressed to let that hour pass without talking about or giving our condolences and sympathy to the horrible situation unfolding in Iran right now, where over 30,000 people were massacred by their own government in a scale that far outweighs Tiananmen Square. It's up there with one of the most brutal repressions of people in history. I
Sure.
spoke to an Iranian who is overseas, and he said just a massive percentage of Iranians no longer live in that country. And even the ruling class of Iran, their own children don't live in that country anymore because it's been completely ruined and drained dry. Those protests have been formed not for political or religious reasons, but for economic reasons, because the ruling class of Iran has completely sucked the economy dry, and there aren't enough basic resources to go around.
Right.
And that,
And you have
among
Trump,
the people, and, go ahead.
you have Trump saying, "Oh, hey, Ayatollah, you are, kind of grandstanding against the Ayatollah, saying you're killing your people. That's not okay. We're gonna hold you accountable for that." And then Trump turns around and also is having crackdowns on protests, killing his people. And it's not the same situation. I don't think
there's no one internationally.
It's probably not helpful to compare and say which is worse. I think the main thing to see here is us, the people of America, and the people of Iran are very much in a similar situation, as much as that is presented on being two different sides. Lots of Trump supporters want the Islamic Republic to fall, right? But that doesn't mean that
even the
as
people
leftists
of Iran
we can't stand with the people of Iran.
Yeah, there are in Iran. There's such diversity of opinion on how to go forward in this situation, because number one, it's not an armed population at all, and number two, politically, the groups of people aren't unified in terms of like the cultural and ethnic mix of those situations is completely, of course, unique in the world. And some of them want the Shah back. Some of them want that out of just simple desperation, that there has to be some kind of stable authority there that isn't the current regime. Some people know. And as I had that conversation, just the big takeaway, because the internet has been cut out there and is only just now cutting on, is just that the people have no unity in what their targets are, or what they should do, or what they should do next. And it's a miserable situation. There's nothing, there's just incredibly disheartening news out of one of one of the worst and most awful situations in the history of civilization. It should turn anyone's stomach. And it should be our goal to make sure that 20 or 30 or 50 or ever that doesn't happen here.
And it's sad to see leftists kind of denying solidarity with those people because it's nuanced and complicated, because of the fact that, you know, we're also against Israel and Israel wants to bring Iran down. You know, this whataboutism and this contest of nation states really takes away from what matters in terms of people power, which is this international solidarity, you know, against both sides of a national nation-state war like that for the people. You know, one of the bigger factions that has an actual plan other than the Shah would be the People's Mujahideen, which is, you know, normally would be the one that leftists would want to support, but they also are more complicated because they've been affiliated with the Mossad, and they used to be designated as a terrorist organization, and then that was no longer the case when it became in U.S. interest to support them. So, on top of that, you also have genuine radical leftists in Iran. I think people may not be aware of that, but, like, not even talking about the People's Mujahideen, you have anarchist federation chapters. There used to have an anarchist federation spanning both Iran and Afghanistan. And they participated in an uprising against the Islamic Republic a couple of years back and were brutally crushed already. That was, the Women, Life, Freedom uprisings, right? It was incredibly disheartening to see leftists disparage that and call it a color revolution just because of, like, enemy of my enemy logic against Israel. Because if you put in yourself in the shoes of people living in that country, you know, they feel the same way about their government as we do about ours.
And so many of them, and this is just me passing along conversations I've had, so many of those people would just take anything. It's not like everybody there even has a political education. They just like food. You know,
during this most recent uprising, I heard tell of some towns that were taken over by rebels actually communizing, like, their factories, setting up legit Soviets where they were, you know, the workers were in charge of the production. That happened for a brief moment until the Islamic Revolutionary Guard came in and crushed it. So yeah, especially also in this moment.
That's definitely a story for. I mean, if you've got something, I'm not cutting you off, but it's definitely a story that could be given more detail at another time.
Yeah, it's a weird place to end because it's a totally different topic, but I will say, you know, especially also with recently the HTS and Turkish advances against Rojava, you know, we need to be supporting revolutionaries in the global south, in the Middle East, in Latin America, because they're facing the brunt of the imperialism that we uphold as Americans, you know. All of our resistance to this American imperialism has to be rooted in those on-the-ground struggles against it.
Well put, well said. And hopefully this was an hour well spent, and that if you spent the hour here with us, that you just a fresh determination to mark this as the high watermark for evil in our planet that we share, because it can't go on like this, can it?
and we won't allow it to. The only way it is the high watermark because this is the moment we start rolling it back. We've seen the kind of liberated areas of Rojava fall recently, and we just need to remember that as much repression, as much state force bears down against us, our strength partly comes from the ways in which our power is invisible at first as it builds, until it reaches a point where you can't ignore it. When I look at these reports from Minneapolis now, it's actually much easier to imagine abolition of the police than ever before, because I'm seeing from afar a situation where the decentralized autonomous networks are genuinely keeping public safety in a much more professional way than the supposed law enforcement. So where do we go from there? I don't think that we go back to re-professionalizing law enforcement. I think that this is a sign of a nail in the coffin for the whole notion.
Let's get out of here.
Yeah. Get out of here. Go resist ICE, everybody. Use those resources, and stay tuned for whatever else we're going to put out. What you can do, what we can do. We're going to do what we can. Solidarity.